Well, welcome back to another incredible episode of The Women on Top, everybody. And I have an amazing guest sitting here with me today. Today's guest is Raakhee Miller, and she is currently the president of Siebert Technologies. She also has been part of different NFT platforms. She really has a strong background with tech and finance right now. And she's been a former exec at Goldman Sachs, as well as a chief product officer at a global FinTech company. So to say that she has an amazing and just such a strong background in all of these topics would be an understatement. Raakhee has also spent 2 decades at, really again, the intersection of tech, finance, and innovation. And we're going to dive into all of that today. So I'm really grateful that you're here today, Raakhee. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Hi, Valerie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We were just talking a little bit about something called Web 2. And I know that your world right now is focused in on this thing called Web 2. And so for somebody who maybe doesn't know what that actually means, would you be able to break that down for, somebody who's outside of the tech and finance industry?
Absolutely. So I think Web 2 kind of is coined more in relation to Web 3. Given that really what we've all grown up in is Web 2, the internet and as we know it. Um, and most of the platforms that we're working on and most of the technologies that we're using are Web2 platforms, payments and credit cards and buying things online, e-commerce, trading, etc. And as opposed to Web3, which I think a lot of people probably have more confusion around Web3. And I think that is essentially it's a blockchain-based ecosystem. So the whole idea of what Web3 is, it's the iteration of the internet now in a way that it's more decentralized.
Hmm.
So instead of if you think about Web 2, the infrastructure of Web 2 is who's hosting which company hosts the servers. You have your Amazons, you have the big tech companies like Meta, then we regulate it, and then you have all this compliance stuff around it. In that world, money moves through banks, which are also centralized at this point. What Web3, the vision for Web3 was more of a decentralized economy where no one really owns the data. You own your own data. So if you um, communicate with me or you exchange an NFT or you exchange cryptocurrency, it's a peer-to-peer mechanism, and it doesn't require any third party to validate.
Hmm.
Why do you have banks? You have banks because if I Venmoed you, Valerie, $50, my account at Chase gets deducted by 50, your account at, say, Bank of America gets, credited by 50. We trust that the banks and the apps that they show us are true and that our money is there. And that's they're they hold the truth, so to speak. So they're the golden record. And that's their function. We pay them for that function. And so those are centralized entities. Versus if I sent you one Bitcoin, A, you'd be very happy. And then, B, I don't need anybody to validate that. We don't need to go to the bank of Bitcoin to say, yes, my account is less one Bitcoin, your account is more one Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. It's a I would say the very crudest way to look at it is it's a big giant database that everyone can look at and a process validates. So you don't need anybody to do that. So it can be truly autonomous and um,
Yeah.
you know permanent. And
Okay.
the record of that cannot be taken away. So there's no way to eliminate the fact that I gave you that Bitcoin, uh, and that transaction happened, and that there's no refuting it. There's no cheating it. There's no double spending it. I can't send you the Bitcoin and then turn around very quickly and send somebody else money that I don't have, right? So that's kind of what Web3 is about. You brought up NFTs, and this is a space I was deeply focused in, and that is more of a representation of data again, so similarly, what cryptocurrency is to money and payments, and value, if you will. NFTs is data and identity. So, for example, people have, created NFTs that represent, marriages or various other things. And now it's like memorialized across, for forever. And so that's more around provenance, like, who created it, when was it created, is it authentic? So that's kind of where art and a lot of IP side of things started to go because of the nature of the irrefutable nature of the blockchain ecosystem. So if you have an NFT that represents a piece of art, there's no way that the artist or somebody else can come and say made this work, because the original maker of that work is forever tied to that NFT. And anyway, that's the general idea. I don't want to bore your listeners with too much technical detail.
No, it's really interesting. And I actually love how you're breaking it down because it's kind of opening my mind as you're speaking about it to being something that's a lot more free, but also something that you get to have a lot more, like you said, it's not regulated, it's more autonomous. So it's a very different world than what we're used to. And before we continue to like get into the layers of all of this and what you do, I'd love to know, were you always interested in technology? Like growing up, were there signs that this was going to be your world? How did you get into this space?
Yeah, I mean, I was always a bit of a nerd and a science kid. So I won't lie. And
That's great.
I think just for me personally, I was just always someone interested in learning and knowledge and interested in the world around me, and held fascination for multiple topics around science and history and how the world works and different cultures and traveling. And I think I really happened on my first job, which happened to be in finance, working for a very large, at that time they didn't call it FinTech, but a financial services technology company. And that was my first job. I grew up in Hong Kong and, got that job there. So I was, in my 20s going to work there, not really knowing much about finance, but being thrown into this job to support software and do consulting work around the software than around finance. So that's kind of how I got into, I'd say, finance and technology in terms of like software and infrastructure development. Um, so I'd say most of it was on the job, but I think there was always this interest in learning and challenging myself, and seeing what's out there.
Yeah, I love that. Clearly, you have a passion for what you do, which just emulates through the screen here. And it's always inspiring to see that, especially for women in some of these fields as well, just because, at least from what I've heard, there's still not a huge representation of females in the industry, especially in leadership roles. Did you find that to be challenging as you were navigating, becoming a leader in your own right? And did you also have mentors that helped pull you through to kind of inspire you as you were, getting more experience in this area?
Yeah, it's interesting. You look back at your career, and I would say it's kind of like when you I find it interesting, given I don't come from here. Mm, I moved to the United States in 2001, and I've been here since then. So, I've seen different facets of how people live and various other things. And, it's always interesting to me when people are asked, well, did you get where you are and what are the obstacles? Because I think when you're going through the process, you are not thinking that way. You're just like, okay, well, I need to, meet this deadline, or I need to deal with this difficult person, or I need to deal with this boss, or I need to speak up more. So if on a day-to-day basis you're living on more day-to-day decisions, I think these patterns you can they probably look back and be like, oh, okay, well, how did I manage to, do that? And I think mentorship is super important, because when you're kind of in the throes of your growing your career, you can get consumed by, just the small minutia of day to day stuff, right? So it's hard to kind of step back and look strategically at your own life while you're living it. Um, and that's where mentors are super helpful. I've been fortunate to have people looking out for me throughout my career. It's been a combination of men and women. I think, um, to your point, there's not a lot of women leadership around, especially, I've been working now for 25 years, right? I think, like when I started, you'd have also women leadership looked very different. I think there were different gender identities and roles and what was expected of women leading 20 years ago
Yeah.
versus now.
Right.
So, you would see someone in a woman leadership role, and it would fall into a couple of, I'm going to use the word cliches, but not in a bad way.
Mhm.
Kind of someone that is um, the career focus and has had to give up a family life, or uh, has to be less feminine, more rigid, more, again, what would be a traditional, I would say, kind of feminine versus male type of, externally facing
Mhm.
attitudes and views and the way they communicate. So, it was always great to see other women. I think for me, a lot of my mentors have been men who are allies, who are open to and not challenged by strong and opinionated women, and who can kind of hold their own and not feel threatened by that. And I think that's really important. I think that's really important even now.
Yeah. Did you feel challenged by some of those traditional stereotypes? Did you ever feel like you were faced with these obstacles a little bit that sometimes we hear from other women, especially when they're pursuing leadership type of roles? And what was that like for you?
Hey, personally, for me, I think everyone's born with different temperaments, and I have seen, mentored, worked with other women who struggled with that.
Mhm.
And for me personally, I've and maybe it's because when I was younger, I was into theater and performance and stuff like that, and kind of I didn't really. It's like that stage fright part
Yeah.
was turned off, and so I never really had a problem speaking up and saying what I needed to say. And for whatever reason, was blessed with a decent amount of EQ to know when to kind of, all right, like pare it down and when to go full. So I think in hindsight, those have served me well, is being able to kind of, know when to push and when to not. Um, but I think what I have struggled with, not yeah, struggled with, or have found frustrating is um, there's been a lot of times in my career where I know what the right thing to do is, but I can't convince people to do what is the right thing to do. And I'm talking about things from like specific projects or strategy or, vision and those types of things. And I found that as a woman, that can be very difficult, is knowing, okay, yeah, this thing we're doing makes no sense, or this thing we're doing would be much better if we did it this way. Um, Now there are women that struggle with even communicating that, right? And that's its own struggle, which I appreciate. Like, oh, I'm not going to speak up, I'm not going to say it. When no one's going to listen to me, or imposter syndrome. Like we all, I think, have gone through that to a varying degree. And then there's you say it, and then it's like you're the only, it's like, am I in the twilight zone? Like, is this not understood?
Yeah.
And then worst thing is, then the thing actually turns up being true or accurate 8 months, not a year from when you said it. And then it's kind of looking back and realizing, you know what, I know what I'm doing. Because then you start to second guess yourself.
Right.
And call it gaslighting because I legitimately don't think that's what people are trying to do. But I feel like this is just part of the fabric of our the corporate world we live in, right? And unless somebody that looks like a certain way, has a particular title, has a particular expectation that they would know, says something, you
Mhm.
find it difficult, I think, as a woman sometimes to move things in the direction that you feel like that's the right direction, even though you're right, so I think that's something I feel like time and again, in sometimes in small little projects or sometime in big little decisions I face.
Mhm.
um
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that's been kind of an observation I've had.
Yeah, I feel like there's an element of, at least for from my experience working in the corporate world, of a little bit of having to prove yourself, like a little bit of having to validate that this makes sense. And sometimes it feels like you have to do that a little bit more than maybe your male counterparts. And
Yeah.
so that comes into that picture as well. And it also caused me, as you were talking, just wonder, from your experience and your opinion, what could we be doing to help women, you know, get more involved in these types of roles, and especially when it comes to finance and tech and some of those industries. What do you think we could be doing to help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all starts with the belief system, and I think that's where we need to change, this belief with, again, I'm not saying that people are choosing this or shortchanging themselves, but we live in the society we live in, right? And it's what beliefs from that do you take in? Are you filtering at that, like, I will be good at certain jobs, or I will not be good at certain jobs, or there are some things that are more that's more male or that's more female, and I think like constantly challenging yourself. And sometimes it's a bit of leap of faith, because when you start off at a new finance job, trust me, your male counterpart has just as many issues as you do. It's just that they believe they're going to get through it, or they're going to move forward, or that they're going to figure it out. And I think that yeah, I'm a mother of two girls, and so it's a constant. No, if you don't believe you can do it, then you might not be able to do it. Like, I get that. Like, that's fine. I understand that. But if you don't believe you can, you're already starting off like failing. I think that's a big thing for me, is constant, even now after 20 years, it's constantly being like, no, I do have this, I can figure this out, and then just taking on the challenge. And 9 times out of 10 things work out, and maybe they don't work out exactly the way you expected, but you learn so much more. So I think this belief of this is for me and this is not for me, I think would be a great place to start for most people, and then in little ways, and then it becomes big ways.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And kind of, I mean, I love what you said about your daughters and just helping them understand that the belief is kind of what comes first and then you go from there. With your family, you had touched on kind of, like one of the stereotypes is that you have to choose career or you have to choose motherhood or family life. How have you been able to blend the two? Because you have these incredible roles. You are the president of a company, which is not a small role by any stretch. So how are you managing to do both and keep your sanity?
Yeah, and this is by no means idea unique to me. I think this whole work life balance, I think it's not really a balance, it's like priorities, and some days it's this and some days it's that, and I think you have to work hard at prioritizing. So again, it starts with, you have to value that, and I think most people do value it when they have it. The problem I see is, especially for like women, they value it, but they put it off. They put off having a family. "Oh, I'll do it later. Oh, my 30s. Oh, I'm in this job. Oh, I need a promotion. Da, da," and then it just skyballs. But I've never really met anyone that had a family and thought, oh, well. I really shouldn't have, or I'm not able to prioritize my children, or I'm not able to prioritize my partner. I think once you once you're in that space, I think a lot of women figure it out. They're not always happy about it, like in the sense that, there is this double standard of having to give up stuff sometimes. But I think that, then it's more core to what do you value in life. And I think most people, men and women, value family, and they value kinship and partnership. I think that's like humanly, universal. It sucks that women have to pay more of a price for it. And I think that's what we need to focus on changing. And this fear of, I'm going to put it off, because, that's the other thing I've heard. I was just actually watching a podcast of this incredibly successful woman, who's a doctor, and the interviewer asked her what her one regret was, and she said that I didn't start a family sooner. And I think that's so universal of many women that have children later in life. Hindsight is 2020, as they say.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And I kind of like the reframe on this of what is it that you value? Because you'll put your energy there, whatever it is, and you'll just figure out a way to do both. And so I've seen a lot of amazing women find some way to do it, whatever that looks like for them might be different. But I do like that as a reframe too, because I think this, like you said, the idea of balance is a little, I don't know, I'm not always bought
I
into it.
know that's its own pressure, right?
Yeah,
Oh, wait, I have to like balance. So, it's equal, and it
right.
doesn't work out that way. And, there's some weeks where it's just, I have a deadline, I have this, I have that, and it's going to be really tough at work. And then I'm living with mom guilt for like not spending time with my daughter or shooing her off when I'm in the call. And then I'll make up for it, which she'll make sure I do and make me buy her something. But that's life. That's
Yeah.
just how it goes. I think you hope that over time that you balance out the scales in a way, or make up for stuff, and you know and if you value, again, your family, like it'll happen. And I think that kids these days also, like, they're just kids these days are just different than like, I think when I was growing up, really, they're just so much more attuned to what's going on in the world. They're really forgiving and open, and I feel like I can have conversations with my kids where, like, I'm really sorry I'm not here, like, right now in this present moment. I'm kind of stuck in this distraction, and I I find myself apologizing to my children all the time. Uh, so that they understand that they're valued, and I will come back and focus on them, which then, obviously, you need to then meet your commitments, otherwise
Yeah.
that's bad.
I love that though. I love the transparency and kind of that like ebb and flow because that really is true to life anyway. Regardless of kids, even we have seasons where we're more focused on one thing than another. And sometimes that has to be something gets put off and you come back around to it. So I really love that. What is it that you love the most about your job right now? Like what you do right now, what is it that lights you up every day that you're inspired by that keeps you moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, at my heart, I'm really like a product person, and so throughout my career, what I've enjoyed is solving problems, finding new ways to do something faster, better, cheaper, more efficient, more beautifully, more attuned to like how you normally work. And I think I found that's interesting to me, just kind of how I am. And so I've kind of been around, like, wearing various hats around that problem solving space, through from like being like pure product and okay, requirements and what does the business need and let's design it, to the technology side of developing and putting it out, to being CEO in my past job, and like orchestrating the machinery that goes into developing product. So I think that to me is the producing that output and then seeing that make a difference in the problem you're trying to solve is satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And just, again, it just feels like you have such a passion for this work. And I'm curious for the person listening in who maybe doesn't have the background of finance or technology, but they're curious about it or they're interested in potentially getting started. What would be a way for them to start building or growing or learning more about technology and finance?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in like learning through osmosis. You got to surround yourself in that environment. And I've seen this multiple times in my career when I started back in, because I've done Web3 like two times. One time early 2017, but that's more focused on crypto and trading, and which was kind of more of my finance background coming in with that. And it was a learning curve and steep in its own way. And then working in the NFT space, it was art and it was IP, and there was a lot of stuff I didn't know inherently. And I just inherently I don't overthink things. So it's like, okay, you jump in and you're gonna know 10% of what people are talking about. And you keep at it, and the next year you're gonna know 20% of what people are talking about. And before you know it, you're gonna be like, okay, you're gonna be able to explain it to a third person and realize, hey, how did I even retain all this information? Um, so I feel really the best way to do is to do, just immerse yourself in that space. Now it's easier said than done, right? I think it's like, well, how do I get that opportunity? And I think that's the core. Well, how do I pivot? How do I get that opportunity to be in that environment? I think at that point, it's really about expectation, like your own expectation management. So if like someone mid-career, let's say they worked in marketing, I'm just pulling that out, and doing more of the marketing type role for some firm or some agency, and now they want to move into, that's right. I think that there is kind of like the careers don't go like this. They go like this, like that. Overall, you're looking at like long term, it's going to be, a curve upwards. But sometimes you might have to take a detour, and sometimes you might have to take a role that you thought was, oh, I'm too senior for this. Or, oh no, I'm going to have to like key in data or do something that seems more like an analyst should be doing, or a younger person from graduate school or something like that. So I think there's a level of humility that you need to have to say, all right, if I want to learn this, I might have to take a step back. I might have to be, in a way, paid a little bit less to have that opportunity, right? Because at the end of the day, we're in like we're in a um it's a consumerism world, right? Like it's supply and demand, right? So if a firm that has its pick of candidates, um why would they hire someone with no experience, right?
Right.
They would hire you if you would take a pay cut, or they would hire you if you are a PhD level person, but you're willing to work at a graduate level person. So I think there are some concessions that you have to think about being okay with, in to be given that opportunity to learn something. And then once you're there, you have to have the motivation to learn, and then quickly leapfrog where you need to leapfrog. Well,
Yeah.
and it happens. I think it's, if you're motivated enough and you have um attitude and willingness.
It doesn't always have to be linear, right? And that sometimes the willingness to just jump into something for the sake of learning that skill or whatever it might be to then get you to the next step is what's required. And I think we need to almost see that more, especially I don't know, just in today's standards where we always want to take the next thing that's going to lead us to the next thing. We're so future focused. I think that's an important concept, what you just said, of like the path doesn't have to be this linear path. And
Yeah, and most of the times it will not be. And and also, you know uh, yeah, it's what you make of it. I do want to address one thing though. I think that it is a form of privilege to be able to afford to do this, you know and there are many that just can't, like, I can't take a pay cut, I can't do this, I can't do that, and I think that it's a reality, and I feel like many people live with that reality, and they have other responsibilities, if you're a single parent, like those types of things. So I think that it is hard, and I don't want to dismiss that. This is absolutely, like, I've been able to make these ebbs and flows because, I got lucky when I was young. I, landed a great job. Had some savings. Had a supportive partner. Not many have that. Not everyone has that. I would say, and I think that in that, what I would say is that these days it's really the sky's the limit in terms of what you want to learn. So maybe you don't get that job, but there's like courses on YouTube. There's courses on this. There's courses on that. Right. So there's a lot of free. Um, and really good learning material on anything you want to learn. So yes, it's harder and there's more time that you have to put in, but it's not impossible. And so it just, again, comes down to motivation, and comes down to, kind of swallowing that bitter pill for a little bit, and you know it'll pay off. And I think that that's important as well. And now with AI, I mean, really, you can just kind of have a tutor that's teaching you whatever you want to learn. If you want to learn coding, or if you want to learn what an option is, or anything really. So, which is great. Which is, I think, one of the biggest innovations of our lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you for addressing that piece because I think you're absolutely right. Right. There's some situations and a lot of people where they aren't able to take that step back. And, certainly I've had those situations too, where it's like, gosh, I don't know if I can take that pay cut. But I always have heard different ways people have been able to be creative too. So, like you just said, the learning piece, or even sometimes just finding somebody that's willing to kind of let you job shadow, or have a coffee chat and like give you a little bit of behind the scenes information. Maybe they mentor you you know, um, just informally, and that can become a great relationship. So I think there's different ways that people tend to pursue these things. They really want to, but you have to have that. I think you're, touching on some grit and tenacity and just that motivation of this is going to pay off in the long run, which is
Yeah.
a challenge. So,
Yeah, and you bring an excellent point around mentorship again. It's so important, like forming this network of trusted people, that are good to you for no other reason, just because they're like, oh yeah, she's a good kid, or like good person, and that's it. And sometimes that's all it takes. And I think you pay it forward to someone else,
right.
and somehow the universe connects you to the right people. So I think there's definitely something to that.
Absolutely. I'm curious if you've ever had a moment where you yourself wanted to throw in the towel. Like, was there ever a time in your career where you were
My
like,
God,
I am
yes.
ready to be done and move to Tahiti and just call it a day?
On a weekly basis. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. I don't know anyone that, even if you're working on a job that's your calling, right? Like, you're a doctor. My partner now is a civil rights attorney, like, he works on things that are just so dear to his heart. Every person, right? There's definitely time. Everyone, I think, goes through that, and I call it the healthy venting. You just have to have the right people around you to better out than in. You vent, whether it's some work friends or personal friends outside, your spouse, your partner, anyone really. I think you let it out, and then the next day you wake up in the morning, you feel lighter, and you have that one thing that you want to get done, and that motivates you to get back. But oh, absolutely, it's absolutely, the world just moves faster and faster as you get older, and just technology, information, so many sources of, like, data, and just stimulation.
And then
Right.
more problems, right?
Oh my God. And you're accessible 24/7. Like, you get a call or a text or a snap or whatever have you, like, depends on what job you do. So living in the modern world can be very overstimulating and hard,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
Just have your venting persons, when one gets tired of listening to you, go to the other, and you work it out, and you wake up the next day.
Yeah, I like that. I like the transparency in that because, we don't always see that. And especially sometimes it feels like the employees, kind of put leaders on a pedestal and don't always realize that there's so many challenges that go with it. And there's so many moments that they have that are humbling and that they themselves don't know what they're doing. And so it's always good to hear the other side of things too. We see the success so often, and like you say, the world's just so fast moving, which also brings me to think about AI. So, AI, gosh, it's taking over the world at this point. And so I'm wondering what you see as, the future is unfolding as far as the influence that AI has on tech and finance and what your kind of guess is about how it's going to impact, the next several years.
Oh God, I think it's all consuming, I think at this point. I think AI is going to touch every facet of um all of our lives. I think as it pertains to work, at the end of the day, like if you boil it down, most companies, finance, non-finance, building products or building something to be consumed for a consumer, right? At some point, the consumer could be the CEO of a company, or the consumer could be an individual retail person. Because of this technology, it's going to change what they want to consume and how they go about consuming it. It's going to change. I think it's just going to change the demand side so much, and I think companies are going to have to figure out how to keep up with it. There are also a lot of legacy industries that are built on niche knowledge and niche systems and niche, kind of areas. But now I think, you can, if you're relatively enterprising, you can be a 18-year-old out of college with an idea, and you leverage one of the many tools out there to design a product. Like, pretty much anyone can be an entrepreneur at this point, which is to me like exciting. I wish I was like graduating college now with this and like, oh, I could do anything. I don't need a tech co-founder. Even I like, if I have an idea and I know it enough, I can just like start something and iterate on it for practically nothing. So it's just gonna be fascinating how everything changes, like what products get built, what the public is consuming, also the interfaces with which they kind of interact, right, with things. Like how many people are going to be like, if it doesn't have a chat window, I don't want to use that product, right? I don't want to be like clicking through screens and finding this and finding
Totally.
that. So I think we're already seeing it's changing the world of like user interface. Things that people would go to, let's say, a professional for, they're just doing themselves very quickly. So it's I think it's even at this point too soon to tell exactly what's gonna impact. In the finance side, I think like where kind of nuts and bolts, like we are looking at it more from efficiencies. So if where AI is going, it's becoming more agentic, right? So far the iteration of what we've seen is, you go to ChatGPT, and if your question is smart enough and in-depth enough, it'll do something and give it back to you, right? um the AI is not making a decision, it's still acting on you asking something and it's giving it back. But I think the true innovation is when you have like an artificial, intelligence being that is making its decision. So it's being given a directive. Hey, you are, let's just say, taking it back to an example that would make sense for you are the compliance person for this company, right? Your job is to make sure all transactions are compliant and that there's no funny business going on, blah, blah, blah. I give you this directive. You understand what funny business means. And now you're making decisions, right? Or this machine is now as an agent making that decision and acting on that decision. I think once we reach that level at scale, I think that's when it's going to be interesting in terms of, well, who are going to be doing the jobs, and then regulation comes in. Right now, all the rules and regulations, especially in finance and in anything to do with HIPAA or like, data, things like that. They're all tied to some process or some human, somebody being accountable. But when the machine is accountable, who's really accountable, right? So it's it's going to be a very interesting time, I think, in so many facets.
Right.
It's very interesting to watch. There's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of fear,
Yes.
and it's going to be like, who wins out? What happens?
Yes, yes. I think that's really well said. And yeah, there's definitely that opportunity and fear right now. I think people are both excited and terrified at the same time. It depends on who you talk to and when.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you have kind of a lesson or something you want to share with the women listening? Just women right now, what should they be taking away? What do you hope lands from the conversation? And yeah, what's just like a piece of advice you want to impart?
I think women are great. And, I just think that inherently we have so many qualities that are maybe traditionally overlooked, but that I think are so valuable in changing the fabric of our society, right? Whether that's, this inherent empathy, and, able to like reason, able to make deals, able to bring people together, ability to like multitask. I think there's so many things, right? And I feel like I would love to see more women just lean into their natural abilities, and also lean into a kind of fire that they have that, whatever it is, I'll figure it out. It's, and I think back to the whole belief thing, right? Like it's like I would really um, love to ask all your listeners to just challenge what they think their beliefs are and where do they come from, and who says that they have to be that, and what's probably a better belief. And these are things that you just have to, sit down and think about. And just because you think about it, it's not going to go away. It takes time, and it takes sometimes. Um, I was watching this thing the other day, and this thing stuck out with me, which I thought was very good, and I would use with my kids is do it scared. You're scared, just do it scared. Like if you're waiting to do something until you're not scared, you're not gonna do it. So just do it scared, right? And so, really think about your limiting beliefs. Think what you want to change, and you just have to do it scared. And even if you fall, you just have to, continue on because things take time, and I think you will fundamentally change yourself by doing that every day.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And I feel like you are a walking example of somebody who has done it scared and just had that tenacity and the grit, like we talked about, and just continued forward. So thank you for being that example for so many women. And as a tradition on this podcast, I close it out with asking whoever I'm interviewing to leave like a quote or reflection or something for the next guest, not knowing who it is. So I'd like to share with you what the last guest left and then give you the opportunity to do the same. So the last guest shared something from a book that she just had published, and it goes like this. A truth teller is a healer, a rebel, a disruptor, and a catalyst for change. A truth teller shakes us to our core, makes us honest, confronts our demons, and validates our desire. A truth teller is a spiritual guide, an artist, and a warrior. A truth teller is a sword that divides us and healing bond that unites us. A truth teller is wild and dangerous, the liberator we need. A truth teller is not an identity we arrive at, but a choice we make every single day when we advocate for our own voices. So speak your truth, feel the fear, and be the truth teller you have longed to be because you are worthy of it.
That that is excellent.
Yeah, I loved that. I love that she
That
shared that
is
as a last as a last quote for
I
everyone.
love that. I love that. Okay. It does it have to be a quote,
No,
or can it just be like,
just anything that's coming to you that you feel called to leave for the next guest that I interview.
ask yourself every day, not why am I in this room, but why I should be in this room. You know, it's it's something that, people are always, especially women, is, that feeling of being an imposter, out of place or not there. Why not me? I think that that is something empowering to think through, and think about, and especially like as it relates to what we've been talking about in the workplace. Don't When the thought enters, oh well, yeah, I don't know, well, why not me? you know why can't I get that project, or why shouldn't I get that project? If I'm in this room filled with mostly men, why not me being the leader, and communicating with authority? So I think I will leave with that, less eloquent.
No, I love that. I love that. That's a great mantra. I needed to hear that. I always need to hear it's kind of selfishly been a great practice because I love the quotes people are leaving or the reflections. I really needed that and I'm gonna walk through life with that I really love that of that why not me versus why me and kind of going into that shrunken feeling. We need to
Mhm.
kind of expand ourselves in that way. And
I love that visual.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for this time. I know we're right up to our time together. I appreciate you so much. And just thank you for being, again, that strong example that so many people need. And I feel like you're just inspiring so many women more than you even realize. And I'm really grateful for your time today. It's not lost on me how precious your time is. So thank you for being a fantastic guest.
Thanks, Valerie. I look forward to listening to more of your podcasts, and wish you continued success.
Thank you. Thanks, Rocky. Appreciate it.